asked by the parties or their attorneys concerning your qualifications as jurors in the case of the state of Georgia versus Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and William R. Bryan. So help you God. All right, thank you. Go ahead and have a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, again, this is the case of the state of Georgia versus Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and William R. Bryan, who are charged each individually and as parties concerned in the commission of a crime by the grand jury of Glynn County with the offenses of murder, felony murder in 4 counts, aggravated assault in 2 counts, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit a felony. If you could please raise your hand if any member of this panel is related by blood or marriage to Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, William R. Bryan, or Ahmaud Arbery. Please raise your hand if you have, for any reason, formed and expressed any opinion in regard to the guilt or innocence of the accused. If you just keep your hands up, after I call your number, you can go ahead and drop them. 421, 424. And the numbers, it's kind of hard to see. There's a glare. So is that 434? 434. And then I can't see, here's 436. And then, ma'am, I can't see your number. 449. I've got 422 also. 450. 452. And 463. All right, thank you. I think I've got everybody. Please raise your hand if you have any prejudice or bias resting on your mind either for or against the accused. 421, 423, 424. And again, I'm 434, 436, 422, 452, right? I've got 432, sorry. And 458. Okay, thank you. Please raise your hand if your mind is not perfectly impartial between the state and the accused. All right. If you think it applies, raise your hand. So let's do that. There's a little of this going on. Okay. 424. Let's see, 434. 436, 449, 452. Okay. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Those are all of the questions that will be asked by the court. In general questions, I'm going to turn this over to the state for further questioning. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Judge. Thank you. All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All right, my name is Linda Dunikoski, and I'm the prosecutor in the case, along with my trial partners, Paul Camarillo and Larissa Olivier. Does anyone here think they know us? All right, no cards. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Now, here's the thing. We've been doing this for a minute. If it's better, you can unclip your number and raise your number up this way so we can see it. We do have a glare on the plastic. And here's the other thing. If you think it applies to you, it does. If you're not sure about it, it does. If there's something you want to tell us, you have a question, it does. Because here's the thing. We're just asking you kind of yes and no questions right now. But eventually, we're going to go and have you go in the other room, and we're going to talk to you kind of one-on-one. And you can explain these things. You can ask some of the questions, and we'll get more explanation from you. So if you think it applies, go ahead and raise your card, okay? So first off, is there anybody here who no longer resides in Glenn County? No hands.
You got one?
Oh, 432. All right. See, that's the other thing. If I miss you, you got to go wave me down, call out. All right, so 432 does not currently reside in Glenn County. All right, we'll explore that with you. All right. See, that was a good example of, well, you know, it might apply. So go ahead and raise those cards for us. Is there anyone here under the age of 18? No hands. Is there anyone here who has been convicted of a felony offense and has not had their rights restored? No hands. Is there anyone here who sat on the grand jury that returned this particular indictment in June of 2020? No hands. Is there anyone here who is currently a post-certified law enforcement officer with arrest powers either federally or locally? 451. Is there anyone here who is 70 years of age or older and you do not wish to serve on this jury? No hands. Is there anyone here who is a full-time student currently enrolled in and attending classes? No hands. Anyone here a full-time caretaker of a child under the age of 6 years and you have no reasonable alternatives for care if you were placed on this jury? No cards. Is there anyone here who is the full-time caretaker of a disabled person or an elderly person and you have no reasonable alternative for care if you were selected to be on this jury? No cards. Is there anyone here who does not speak the English language or has trouble understanding English? No cards. Is there anyone here who has trouble hearing? 421. Are you having trouble hearing me right now, sir? No? Okay. So we anticipate that this case is going to last basically through November 19th, which is the Friday before Thanksgiving. So what we're wanting to ask all of you is, do you have some sort of hardship or scheduling conflict, not at work, but in your personal life, that would keep you from serving on this jury up until November 19th? And when I say hardship or scheduling conflict, I'm talking about you have surgery scheduled for, next Wednesday. You have airline tickets to go to Vermont for the birth of your first grandchild, big life event, that kind of thing. Those are the scheduling things that we want to know about that might impact your jury service. Does that apply to anyone here? 421. All right, so the current Brunswick Judicial Circuit District Attorney is Keith Higgins. Is anyone here related by blood or marriage to your elected District Attorney, Keith Higgins? Does anyone know Mr. Higgins personally? 449. Now, your former District Attorney was Jackie Johnson. Is there anyone here related by blood or marriage to Jackie Johnson? Does anyone know Miss Johnson personally? No hands. Is there anyone here who has an opinion about last year's election where DA Jackie Johnson was defeated by Keith Higgins, who's now your elected district attorney? Does anyone have an opinion about that particular election? 436. Is there anyone here who has an opinion about why the Cobb County District Attorney's Office, we're from Marietta, Cobb County, why the Cobb County District Attorney's Office was assigned by the Georgia Attorney General to prosecute this case? Does anyone have an opinion about that particular appointment? No hands. Is there anybody here who would be unable to give the state a fair trial because the prosecutors aren't from here? I mean, we're not from Glenn County. We're from Cobb County, Marietta. Is there anybody here who won't give the state a fair trial because we're not from here? No cards. All right, so the Waycross Judicial Circuit District Attorney is George Barnhill. Does anybody know Mr. Barnhill or related to him at all? Blood or marriage? No cards. Now, George Barnhill Jr. used to be an assistant district attorney here. He now has private practice in Brunswick. Does anybody know George Barnhill Jr.? No cards. Now, the Atlantic Judicial Circuit, that district attorney is Tom Durden. Does anyone know Tom Durden, related to him by blood or marriage? No cards. All right, so over on this side, we have the defense attorneys in this case, Jason Sheffield and Robert Rubin right here. Does anyone know Mr. Sheffield or Mr. Rubin? Morning. No cards. Next, we have Laura Hogue and Frank Hogue. Does anyone know the Hogues? No cards. And then we have Mr. Kevin Goff and Miss Jessica Burton. Does anyone know Mr. Goff? Anyone ever worked with Mr. Goff here? Okay. And no one knows Miss Burton. No hands. Now, the defendants in this case are, first off, Travis McMichael. Does anyone know personally Travis McMichael? 449. Then we have Greg McMichael. Oh, 441 too? All right, thank you, 441. Anyone else know Travis McMichael? Greg McMichael. Does anyone know Greg McMichael personally? 441. And does anyone know Mr. William, goes by Roddy Bryan? Does anyone know Mr. Bryan? 423. Does anyone know Miss Amy Elrod? Does anyone know Lee McMichael, the wife of Greg McMichael? 441. Does anyone know Lindsay McMichael, the daughter of Greg McMichael? All right, we have 441, 449, and 456. The victim in this case is Mr. Ahmaud Arbery. Does anyone know, or did anyone know Mr. Arbery personally? Did anyone know his mother, Miss Wanda Cooper Jones? Does anyone here know his father, Marcus Arbery, Sr.? 422 and 463. Does anyone here know Mr. Arbery's siblings, Jasmine or Marcus Jr.? No card. Oh, 463. And of course, does anyone here know Judge Walmsley at all? No cards. All right, so we're going to talk a bit about jury service and your prior jury service. Is there anyone here who has gone through this process, you know, voir dire, where you've had to raise your cards and answer some questions, been selected to be on the jury, has listened to all the evidence, and then went into the back to deliberate with 11 other people? Has anyone ever sat on a jury throughout the entire process? All right, so we have 422. Okay, keep your cards up for me. I'm going to go through 441, 449, 450, and 463. All right, out of the 5 of you, was anyone the foreperson of the jury? 463 was the foreperson. All right, and then was there anyone here whose jury was unable to reach a verdict? I don't want to know what the verdict is, but your jury never came to a verdict. Does that apply to anyone? No hands. Is there anyone here who's ever served on a grand jury? 452. When you all received your jury summonses, got the piece of paper in the mail, and it directed you to the clerk's website. And you all went there because it had information about COVID, when to come, what everything was. So here's the thing. On that website, there were also some links to this case. And it had legal documents. I mean, like boring legal documents like motions and all that other stuff. It's okay if anybody looked at them. We just need to know if you looked at them because they were publicly available on the website when you got your jury summons. Did anyone here look at or pull up any of the documents that are the legal documents related to this case? And we have 423. Anyone else? All right. Is there anyone here who has served in the military? 451, 452, 456. Is there anyone here with prior law enforcement training or prior law enforcement experience, meaning you're not post-certified now, but you used to be, or have some sort of experience like that? 456. Is there anyone here who's related or has a close personal friend? Now, here's the thing. When I say related, I'm not talking about Uncle Bob in Iowa that you haven't seen or talked to in 10 years. Okay, so what we're looking for is people that you have conversations with, they're close family members, they're close personal friends where you speak to them about stuff, including maybe this case. So does anyone here have a close personal friend or family member who is in law enforcement? 424, 456. Please raise your hand if you have experience in the field of social work, like you've been a social worker in the past, or have a degree. No cards. Please raise your hand if you have work experience in the field of counseling, psychology, psychiatry. In other words, it was your undergrad degree, psychology, or you actually have been a counselor or a therapist. No hands. Please raise your hand if you have experience in the legal field. You are a lawyer. You're a paralegal. You've been an administrative assistant or have an undergrad degree in criminal justice. Anybody have any experience in the legal field? No hands. Is there anybody who has had work experience within the criminal justice field? And that can be like working at a jail or a prison, probation department. You could minister to people at the prison, anything that related to the criminal justice system. 452. 456. Is there anybody here who has a relative or a close personal friend or even just knows somebody that works as a district attorney or works in a district attorney's office? It could be here or elsewhere. And we've got 449 and 458. Is there anyone here with medical training? And I don't mean you know how to do CPR. I'm not talking about you being a lifeguard. I'm talking you have actual medical training. All right. We've got 440, 441, 451, and 452. Is there anybody here who's related or has a close personal friend or just happens to know a criminal defense attorney? No cards. Is there anyone here who's had a bad experience with law enforcement such that it sticks out in your mind? No hands. Is there anybody here who's had a bad experience with a prosecutor such that it sticks out in your mind? Is there anyone here who's had a bad experience with a criminal defense attorney such that it sticks out in your mind? No cards. All right, so we're going to now talk about arrests, prosecutions, convictions, that kind of thing. And when we talk about this, what I'm talking about is the crimes of like DUI, shoplifting, to something more serious. So I'm not talking about you got a traffic ticket one time or jaywalking or something like that. I'm talking about whether you, and this is the question I'm going to ask, whether you have ever been convicted, arrested, prosecuted for something like DUI to more serious charges. So please raise your hand if that applies to you. All right. 420, keep them up for me, thank you. 422, 439, 440, 449, and 463. Thank you. Please raise your card if that applies to a close personal friend or close family member. They've been arrested and or convicted for something like DUI to something more serious. 422, 449. Please raise your hand if you have ever been falsely accused of a crime, whether it involved the police or not. Please raise your card if you have a close family member or close personal friend who you feel was falsely accused of a crime, whether it involved the police or not. 424. We're going to now transition from arrests and convictions over to being the victim of a crime. All right? So please raise your hand. We're going to do a couple different sections for this. So the first section is, please raise your card if you yourself have been the victim of either a crime of violence or a crime against your person. And that can be anything, but it could also be, you got your bag or backpack and somebody ripped the backpack off. You weren't hurt, but it was a crime against your person. You were there, that kind of thing. Whatever you consider a crime against your person to be, or a violent crime, you yourself having been the victim. 421, 432, 434, 463. All right, same kind of crime. Does anyone have a close family member, a close personal friend who has been the victim of a violent crime or a crime against their person? 421. Anyone else? Family or friend? Okay. Has anyone here ever witnessed a violent crime in progress? 421. And yeah, 451, right. Has anyone ever taken cell phone video of what they thought was a crime in progress, like a drunk driver or some other crime that they witnessed? Anybody take cell phone video? No hands. All right, so we're going to talk about burglaries and home invasions. So burglary is you come home and all your stuff's gone. Home invasion is you are home and someone kicks your door in, or you wake up and they're standing over you in the middle of the night. So those sorts of things are what we're talking about. Have you personally ever been the victim of a burglary or a home invasion? Please raise your hand. 421, 422. That's it? Okay. Close relative, close family member been the victim of a burglary or home invasion? 436, 450. Anyone else? Is there anyone here who's ever had a firearm stolen out of their house or out of their car, like an entering auto and someone took your gun out of your car? You, family member, friend. 456, 422. Is there anyone here who has called 911 in order to report a crime in progress? I'm not talking about medical emergencies. I'm calling, you've called 911 because you saw a drunk driver. So you went ahead and called 911. Anyone here? 434, 436, 440, 455. Is there anyone here who's ever had to give a formal statement to law enforcement? I'm not talking about a traffic accident by the side of the road and you talking about that to the officer. I'm talking about you've actually had to give a formal statement to a law enforcement officer, either as a witness or in some other capacity. 432, 434, and 455, and 436. Anyone else? Is there anyone who's had to be a witness at trial? Meaning you went into the courtroom, you took the seat, you raised your hand, the judge was there, and you gave testimony either in front of a jury or maybe just before the judge, but you were a witness at a trial. 432, 434, 451, and 455. Other than our law enforcement officer, is there anyone here who has taken it upon themselves to go investigate a crime? 455. Do y'all know anybody who went and investigated a crime? Who was not a law enforcement officer? friend or family member that took it upon themselves to investigate a crime? No hands. All right, so I'm going to ask you guys to do this. Take a look around and look at each other. Does anybody here know anybody else? All right, so we're getting some, all right, we're getting, oh boy, a whole bunch of hands. All right, let's see. I'm going to do this. 423, who do you know?
Try to do, yeah, I was going to say, try to do it by number.
423, yeah, thank you, Judge. You know 456. All right, so 456, that's who you know? All right. 444, which juror number do you know? 463. And 463, you know 444. And then 458, who do you know? Which number? Oh, 439? All right, 439 and 458. All right, thank you. Oh, and 449? Who? 450. All right. 449, 450. All right. Okay. That is the highest number we've had.
I was going to say, that's almost like a little reunion.
I know. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, a couple weeks ago when you went out to Selden Park and you were there with all of the other potential jurors, okay, you may have seen somebody you know. The question I'm asking you is, did you see somebody else who had been called for jury duty in this case, such that if both you and that other person ended up on the jury, it might be weird or awkward? And what I mean by that is, you saw your son out there, okay? You saw your boss out there. You saw somebody who directly reports to you out there, so that if you're both on this jury, that could be awkward or weird for you. So does that apply to anybody here? No cards. All right, so I'm going to ask this question in reverse. Is there anyone here who does not own a firearm and you do not have a firearm in your household, meaning there are no handguns, rifles, or shotguns in your household and you don't own one? Your spouse doesn't own one. No handguns in the household. Does that apply to anybody? 432, 457, 463. Other than our law enforcement officer, is there anyone here who's ever had to carry a gun as part of their job? 455. Is there anyone here, other than our law enforcement officer, who has taken it upon themselves to get firearms training? You went and took a class. You got some training. Got 441, 444, 449, 455, and 456. Please raise your hand if you have lived in Glenn County for less than 5 years. Do this. 424, 434, 440, 452. Is that it? All right. Is there anyone here who currently lives in the Satilla Shores neighborhood? 449. Is there anyone here who's 444? Okay, I just want to make sure. Is there anyone here who previously lived in Satilla Shores, but you've since moved? Previously lived in Satilla Shores. Is there anyone here who is especially familiar with Satilla Shores due to friends or family members being there, or you go there for some other reason? No cards. Is there anyone here who currently resides in the Royal Oaks neighborhood? Is there anyone here who previously resided in Royal Oaks? Is there anyone who's familiar with Royal Oaks because you have friends or family or some other reason you go there often? No cards. Is there anyone here who is familiar with the fancy, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to back up. Is there anyone here who lives in Fancy Bluff? 422. Is there anyone here who previously resided in Fancy Bluff? Is there anyone here especially familiar with the Fancy Bluff neighborhood because you go over there, friends or family live there? No cards. All right, so this is about knowing yourself. Is there anyone here who has a religious, moral, or ethical conviction that would keep them from passing judgment on another person, which means basically, if you're selected on this jury and you go back in to deliberate, you're never coming back with a verdict because you are never going to come back with guilty or not guilty. In this case, that's the only thing you're going to do is say guilty or not guilty. That's it. So is there anybody here who feels because of a religious, moral, or ethical conviction, you are just not going to be able to deliberate with others and render any verdict at all? No hands. Does anyone have a private reason why they would not be able to deliberate with others and render a verdict in this case? No cards. So once again, a reverse question. Is there anybody here who does not belong to any religious, social, or fraternal organization? In other words, you don't go to church, mosque, synagogue. You are not a member of a book club, a bowling league, a bridge club. You are not a member of any professional organization in your profession. You just are not a member of any religious, fraternal, or social organization. 421, 424, 432, 440, 441, let's see, 455, 452, and 456. Please raise your hand if you, a relative, or a close personal friend has ever been arrested and you thought the circumstances of the arrest meant that they were treated unfairly by either the criminal justice system or by law enforcement. No cards. Please raise your hand if you, close personal friend, family member, has ever been arrested for false imprisonment or kidnapping. Please raise your hand or your card if you, family member, close personal friend, has ever been arrested for shooting someone or shooting at someone. No cards. Please raise your hand if a close personal friend or family member has ever been arrested for the crime of murder, whether it involved a handgun or not, any kind of homicide or murder. No cards. Is there anyone here who will be unable to follow the law? Judge Walmsley is the one who will give you what the law is. But is there anybody here who thinks that they won't be able to follow the law if they disagreed with it or they thought it should be something else? Is there anyone here who won't be able to follow the law? No cards. All right. Is there anybody here who wants to serve on this jury? No cards. All right, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read to you a list of potential witnesses. All right, so I'm going to try and go through it kind of quickly, but once again, this is that instance where you got to shout it out because I'll be reading the names and you'll think, wait a second, 2 names ago. Feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to get my attention. Feel free to raise your cards, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through officers who are with the Glenn County Police Department. All right, so these are Glenn County police officers. William Duggan, Sheila Ramos, Chris Lowther, Ricky Shane Minshew.
You got one.
Oh, 451. You know Minshew? All right. Jeffrey Brandenberry, Adam Jackson, Parker Marcy, Brad Butler, Caitlin Roberts Phillips, Roderick Nohilly, Stephen Lowry, Brandon Gregory, Ronald Cooper, Diana Bibby, Sherry Bashler, Christopher Hatcher, 449, you know Chris Hatcher? Robert Rash. All right, so we got a bunch for Rash. So Robert Rash, go ahead, keep them up for me so I can get your numbers. 422, thank you, sir. 451, 456. Officer Powers, Officer Stansberry, Officer Owens.
Got one.
And 451 on Owens.
What was Stansberry's first name? Is it Matthew?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Matthew.
I know Matthew.
All right. And we tend to get first initials like T. Owens. So, yeah. All right, so you know Stansberry. Anybody else know Officer Stansberry? No. All right, then we have Glenn County Sheriff's Office Detective Stephanie Herndon Britt, 451. Now, with the Glenn County 911 Center, we have Kara Richardson, Jamie Dunwoody. No cards. So now I'm going to go ahead and transition into the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation has both special agents and then they have the crime lab. So we're going to do the special agents first. So first off, we have Jason Seacrest, Jessica Hamilton, Jennifer Woodward, Richard Dial, Brian Smith, Garrett Morton, Amanda Barker, I missed someone, Matthew Heath. No cards. Oh, and Lawrence Kelly. So now we're going to go ahead and go through our crime lab personnel. We have James, goes by Jim Gordon, Amanda Cook, Jesse Worley, Ann Kistler-Rao, Brian Leopard, Dr. Edmund Donahue. You know Brian Leopard? Yeah, 449. All right, so anyone else know Brian Leopard? Anyone know Dr. Edmund Donahue? No cards. Now I'm going to go through sort of non-law enforcement, non-GBI people. See if you know anybody on this list. Joe Mandela, Joseph Allen Bartlett, Subi Lawrence. All right, so Subi Lawrence, we have 423 and 456. Annabelle Beasley, 423. But not 456, no. Anyone else know Annabelle Beasley? How about Christy Barber? No cards. Matt Albenze, John Ronald, you know Albenze? And Matt Albenze, yeah, 422 and 449. All right, John Ronald Olson goes by Ronnie Olson. No hands. All right, Diego Perez or his wife Brooke Perez, 458. Larry English or his wife Amy English. Miss Kelly Parr or her father Randall Parr. Daniel Alcott, Christine Alcott or Judith Alcott. Kim Ballesteros. Carol Flowers. Lauren Bennett. Linda Randall, Ashley Wittenberg, Danielle Stoddard, Cynthia Drummond. Mr. James Trimmings, Catherine Miles, Cody Johannes, Derek Thomas, Hillary Lauren Brady Germano, Josh McGowan, Kyle Meisner, Nicole Lee Joyner, Rusty Russ Wayne Johnson, Zach Langford, or Ashley Langford, 456 and 458. That's for Zach Langford? All right. No Ashley. Okay, 458 knows Ashley. 456 knows Zach. Heaven Bryan, Peyton Thompson. Okay. Did I miss anyone? All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. The defense has some additional questions for you, so thank you very much.
Mr. Sheffield.
Yes, Judge, thanks. Good morning, everybody. First of all, congratulations. You are the first group to show up in full the soonest. Other groups we've sat here waiting for quite some time, so we really appreciate you being on time and timely. Secondly, we have been doing this now for 2 weeks. We've gotten your answer forms back. We've studied them very carefully. And you've been very honest with us, very candid in those forms, and we appreciate that. We want your honesty. It doesn't hurt our feelings. It's something that we really are asking that you continue to do this morning when we talk with you privately, one-on-one, in the jury room. As you've been sitting here for a while, I know some people raised their hand that they recognized some of the men over here, but now that you've been sitting here for a good 45 minutes, let me just ask one more time. Do any of you recognize Travis McMichael, formerly with U.S. Coast Guard, formerly with Metzen Marine? Those of you that have already indicated, that's fine. Anybody else feel like they may recognize Mr. Travis McMichael? 421. Okay, good. How about his dad, Greg McMichael? Now that you've sat here for a minute, also 421. And if you're way in the back there and you can't see, you're fine to stand up and come around. I'll also ask about Mr. Roddy Bryan. Anybody here who didn't raise their hand before recognizes them now. 421 and 422. Okay, great. So you've been hearing a lot about the case. We're sure of that. Some of you maybe not as much as others. But in the time that you've heard or read about the case, we'd like to know if any of you have developed any negative feelings whatsoever, big, small, medium, about the men accused. If you have developed a negative thought or feeling about them based on what you've heard so far, raise your hand. And if you'll keep them up, I'm going to go row by row, and I'll get to you slowly but eventually. 421, 422, 423, 424, 432, 434, 436, 439, 449, 450, 452, and 463. Very good. Thank you. And that goes for all three men, and we can break it down when we get into the room later. How about any of you that may hold negative feelings about criminal defense lawyers? For doing the work that we do, or stepping in and representing folks accused of crimes, if you have a negative feeling about us to the extent that you feel it would cause you to raise your card. Okay, very good. Thank you. Have any of you ever decided to support a political candidate because that political candidate has campaigned on wanting to limit, in any way, gun rights, or the types of firearms that should be for sale. And that support could be voting support or financial support, that candidate wants to limit gun rights in some kind of a way. Okay?
Can you ask that question again?
Sure. Have you ever decided to support a political candidate, anyone running for office, because that candidate wants to limit gun rights? 421. Yes, sir. Thank you. How about if you generally oppose the laws that allow citizens to carry firearms or to have concealed firearms and to carry those firearms out into the public? Do any of you here oppose the laws that allow that? Disagree with the laws that allow that? 421, 436. Okay, thank you. Did any of you participate in any of the social justice movement demonstrations or marches, whether you attended to watch and show support by merely physically being present, or you actually got together and marched, related to the social justice movement that's been happening locally, statewide, nationally, either before the shooting incident in this case or afterwards? If you participated in that in any way, please raise your hand or your card. 455 and 458, thank you. This next question asks about your support of either Black Lives Matter, which is sort of its own group and initiative, or your support for the I Run with Ahmaud campaign or the Justice for Ahmaud campaign, and whether that support is a financial thing or even a bumper sticker or even a yard sign or a post on Facebook where you have shared the photograph of it, I Run with Ahmaud or Justice for Ahmaud, that we see circulating around communities and what we see online on Facebook and whatnot. Okay, 421, 432, 436, 439, 457, 458. Has anyone here ever been denied an opportunity? You just feel it in your heart, or you thought you were denied an opportunity because of your ethnicity or your race? Please raise your card. If you feel you were denied an opportunity for whatever reason based on your ethnicity or race. 449. Do any of you feel that you've ever been falsely accused of something or placed under suspicion about something because of your ethnicity or your race? You've been looked at, watched, or placed under suspicion or wrongfully accused of something because of ethnicity or race. 439. Who agrees with this statement? The old Georgia state flag, the one that flew from 1956 to 2002, is a racist symbol. The one that was removed from the polls in 2002, really for that reason, but who agrees with that? That the old flag, if you kind of do or think you might, it's fair to raise your card. 421, 424, 432, 436, 439, 444, 455. Who here feels that people of color are not treated fairly in the criminal justice system? The criminal justice system expands pretty widely in this country. Whatever that means to you, they're not treated fairly, people of color. 421, 424, 432, 434, 436, 439, 444, 455, 457. Okay? Who feels that the police in this country do not treat black and white folks the same? Don't treat black and white folks the same. Police, whether that's locally, statewide, nationally, if you feel that that's the state of affairs today, please raise your hand. 421, 424, 432, 436, 439, 444, 455, and 463. If you feel like psychologists or psychiatrists can find a mental illness in just about anybody these days, please indicate. You feel like psychiatrist or psychiatrist could find a mental illness in just about anybody. 421, 424, 434, 440. Okay, thank you. Do any of you have an opinion about the elapse of time between the incident date here, February 23rd, 2020, and the arrest date, almost 4 months later, 3.5 months later? If you have an opinion about that elapse of time, please raise your hand. 421, 422, 423, 424, 432, 436, 439, 444, 463. Thank you. Okay, these next two questions, and I only have 4 left, are about impairment. And what we mean by impairment is the following. We're going to be in trial for probably a couple of weeks. We're going to be asking you to pay attention from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, generally speaking, with a morning break, lunch break, afternoon break. And we need your full attention. This is critical that we have you paying attention to the evidence that's being presented in court at all times. Do any of you here feel like you won't be able to give us your full attention during those time periods because you've got something going on in your personal life or in your professional life that is going to take away and distract you to the point that you won't be able to really pay attention during the trial, that you'll be impaired in some way? We use the word impairment, but it really means attention. We need your full attention. 421. Okay. On the same line, is there any kind of mental or physical, hearing or visual impairment? You have a bad back, herniated disc, and you can't sit for long, and you got to constantly get up, and it's distracting, and it takes away from your attention, or something that's ongoing that you're concerned will take your attention away from the trial. 421, 424. Okay. Obviously, this is a case that's got headlines, nationally, locally, and there's a history of things coming to Brunswick because of this case. Are any of you concerned in any way that whatever verdict you reach, being a juror in this case will somehow cause you concerns after the trial is over? That you have concerns for whatever reason? We will drill down on that, but whatever concerns you have, we want to understand what those are. Yeah. Okay. 422, 423, 434, 436, 439, 440, 441, 444, 449, 452, 456. Good. Thank you. And lastly, the forms that you filled out. It's been a minute, a couple weeks probably, and if anything has changed on that form, address, social media account, sometimes we change our names in our accounts, any of the information, the number of times you've watched or you've looked into things or you've gone to the neighborhood or anything that has changed from what your answer originally was on that form to as you sit here today, please raise your hand if anything has changed so that we can follow up with you about that. We just want to understand these things very simply. Okay, 434, 440, and 449. 440 and 449. Okay, that's all I have. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do at this point is we're going to take a 10-minute recess. During the recess, I'm going to ask that you go ahead and step out of the jury assembly room. Now, I'm going to give you some instructions that are going to apply to you from this point forward, which are: do not discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anybody else. Do not go looking for any information about the case. And if anybody approaches you about the case, please notify the court and we'll go ahead and get that addressed. So again, during this recess, don't step out of here and get on, if you have your phones, I'm not sure you do, but if you run into somebody or you know somebody on the panel, don't go talking about the case. Don't go looking for any information about the case. If somebody's talking about the case around you or in your presence of hearing, please walk away. Again, those are going to be the instructions of the court. Also, during this brief recess, just grab your personal belongings and when you step out. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're transitioning into the courtroom itself, and we're going to be inviting probably each of you individually, that's just the way this has gone, to respond to some questions, basically follow up to what we've done this morning. That process takes a little bit of time. Like I said, most of the panels have gone through the day, so from a planning standpoint, please plan on that. And I do ask for your patience. This is a very deliberate process, but it is a process that moves along. It's just at a very deliberate pace. So with those instructions, again, we'll take a 10-minute recess. We'll see you all back in the courtroom, hopefully just in a little bit. Thank you. All right, we are back on. Defendants are present, represented by counsel. We have panel 11 before the court. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor, state's ready.
Is
And
it-
Judge, 451 is a law enforcement officer. I was wondering maybe we could start with him.
Yeah, he indicated he was post-certified. I think he said he was with Brunswick PD.
Yes, sir.
Anything from the defense? Let me finish doing the general announcements first. Are we ready to proceed?
We're ready to proceed.
Ready to proceed.
We're still waiting on Ms. Burton. She's indisposed, but we have no objection to taking up the arrest power issue right now.
I don't know if they're moving to cause or they want to examine him first.
Just to make sure that the cause.
To make sure that he's post-certified and he works for the Brunswick Police Department?
Well, we don't need to.
Okay. I understand the motion for cause is, he indicated in general questioning that he's with law enforcement, is post-certified, and his questionnaire shows he's with the Brunswick Police Department. From the-
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, no, sorry.
Your Honor, there's also 432 who indicated he's leaving Glenn County this weekend. I couldn't hear.
I believe he indicated he was moving out of the county. We don't know when, but that is something we'll explore when we call him in.
And then also, 452 approached the court and the deputies and the clerk, indicating he had worked night shift and was wondering about timing. I'll just point that out. You may want to take him out of turn, unless there's any objection to doing that.
No
No
objection.
objection.
Let's take a few more minutes. We'll get started.
Your Honor, with the, say, for example, the post-certified number 451, do you just send a message back that he can go on home? He stays there with the group the whole day?
No, until lunch, until we take a break. No, I try to excuse the jurors whenever I have an opportunity to, but I think this group in particular, it's only fair that they get some instructions from the court on what to do if they are excused. So I'm waiting to provide those instructions.
Well, would you, you're okay to jump?
If I may. I can't see anyway. Should be ready shortly, Judge.
421?
We have questions.
421.